Like myself, I'm not religious at all. So it was funny when I got 3 questions, I was like, oh, total. I've never even read the Bible, right? So, as you know, probably in Canada, a lot of times, there's a little bit less religion, I think, than the United States. I could be wrong. Whereas there were a couple of people in our group, like Claudia, that said, "Oh yeah, I was getting the biblical reference," you know. Mm-hmm. And then once that came up, I started to think about it. But it was interesting. So that was something you did deliberately, I guess.
At first, no. I think I was a quarter of the way through on the first draft when I decided to do that. So then I had to go back to the beginning and start doing things all over again. But
oh, wow.
So it was kind of an add-on.
Wow.
But I wanted the story to always be that you could just read the story and get that piece of the story, but then have a subcontext to the story also. When I wrote that, actually, and any time when I do write, um, I don't want to tell the reader this is what it is. This is what you should view it as. I want you to come to your own conclusion because, we bring all of our different life experiences to whatever we're doing, whatever we're reading, how we work. And I think that, it's the same way with the novel. And in my mind, I looked at it as redemption, like you were saying before. I can definitely see, because that's the way I wrote it also, that, maybe perhaps the devil did win. There was a lot of destruction, a lot of death that happened in that town, and a lot of the scars were emotional scars that a lot of people would probably carry for the rest of their lives and, also pass down to, their children. So, I think there's quite a few different ways to look at that, but I think that.
But also, I think from a biblical point of view, like if it has a biblical connotation to it, Christ died in a horrific way on the cross, but then rose from the dead. So I think there is a certain amount within Christianity. There is that whole idea that things may be bleak, but there's good triumph over evil eventually.
Exactly. He is, as they say, the lamb, the sacrificial lamb. So that's the big, piece in the New Testament. So, the devil sometimes may have his day, but, redemption is there also. Forgiveness is there also. I think that Beatrice, Paul's sister, she had a bit of a change of heart. His mother, I guess there remains to be seen. So, yeah.
And with Enda's pact with the devil, and the fact that Lar and Mary were like her children as well, but in her pact she only really safeguarded Maggie May, right? Again, and that to me was a bit heart-wrenching, given that they were all supposed to be, she was supposed to be like a mother to them in a kind of, in a way, and, given that she knew what was going to happen, it was the idea there that she was holding back because she had made the pact, therefore Lar and Mary needed to be sacrificed to save Maggie May. Is that kind of like the thought process behind that? She couldn't go in and save Lar. She couldn't go in and save Mary, really. I mean, Mary was going to do what she needed to do. So that's, but you know what I mean? I kind of, when I was reading, I was like, okay, well, this is why she didn't do more to help Lar, because he is the sacrificial lamb for Maggie May in a way.
I would have to say no.
Okay. No, that's
The pact.
I disagree.
Good. So at the very end when Enda's talking, or we have the exposition um, surrounding Enda, and she's talking about who she really made the pact for, and what I start interweaving at that is on the story of Paul. So what the way I kind of mixed it in was, did she really make a pact for her daughter? Did she really make a pact for Mary? Did she really make a pact for Paul? Knowing that something's going to happen, and no matter what you do, that is going to happen, there's really not a lot of choices. But here you have this devil who, he's the great trickster. You know, he's probably thought of two or three different ways that Enda may try to fool him. She knows this already. So she says, yeah, maybe I want the pact for my daughter. I want to save her. But was she really that keen on saving her daughter per se? Or did she know that her daughter would survive somehow? Her daughter had other things that the other ones didn't have.
Right.
Her daughter could pass for white. Mary couldn't.
Yeah.
Her daughter could marry someone, nice, well-to-do. Paul didn't, or he chose not to have that, to go that way. So everybody had these pretty good, these things going for them. Mary was strong-willed. She knew Mary was going to be strong-willed, and there's no talking her out of it. Maggie May, eventually she was going to see, hey, I have some more options. She can deal with that. Paul, not a lot of options for him.
Right.
Yes, I, writing the book, and I do have to say, I had these great ladies who edited my book. I think they're just fantastic. Their business is critique my novel, and one of the discussions that we had was how do you balance some of the more violent aspects in a novel, but still get that across that wow, this stuff was pretty bad, that happened during that time. So we had actually a quite lengthy discussion about that because I didn't want to sugarcoat it, but I didn't want to turn off the reader either. Um, but some of these things, actually a lot of these things did happen, and actually some of the things that you read actually in the book were probably more the middle of the road things that kind of happened. I mean, there were like far worse things that happened, and it's, I think that's one of the reasons too that I wrote the book was because I could never really wrap my mind around how we could, as people, do this to other people. But um, in high school and in college, how we read about in psychology class about the mob mentality and how that takes over people and they do things that they just normally wouldn't do, and then you see that it's played out time and time and time again. And so I just really that was part of me, and I'm still asking questions about my own novel that I wrote. You know, you know, what makes a person do something like that? But then on the flip side, we have Mary and we have Paul, who she loves dearly. What can make two people feel like that for each other, living in the time that they're living, which I think is also a great thing. Also,
Your question, and you read the book, and uh, of course, it's always coming up. How can this be happening, right? And 100 years later in 1964, how can this be happening? 1981 in South Africa, how can this, it's repeating, right?
Yes.
And you just, how can it be happening in so many different places? But, stemming back to your question there, and I thought it was really interesting the way you set it out for when you're looking at Nicholas, and his mother was explaining to him how people in the South think, right? And they're born into this, and they have this possession. They think that, this is normal, and what would you do? And, I thought that was very, very insightful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, why is this more accepted than you think it should be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it gets to that. And then in terms of Simeon in particular, I was really conflicted about the whole rape thing within that. And the way it was written, and, whether he felt really badly about it, because when I read it, I was like, okay, it seems like that person seems bad, feels badly, didn't want to do it, was trying to not stop it in a way that he could maybe, but then Simeon is so evil that you're like, well, that couldn't have been him. That couldn't have been the person.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's why I set up the very first part of the novel the way that I did, talking about how the South used to be at their in their heyday. They were richer than a lot of the nobility in Europe. I mean, Southern cotton was widely wanted around the world. And that was one of the reasons why the South really did not want to give up free labor for producing this cotton that just made them, filthy rich. So we have Simeon, who's now this heir, basically a prince, king to be, who's going to inherit this beautiful world of, money and influence and, a nice manner to, lord over, and it's snatched away from him. Others who, a lot of other, because there weren't that many whites who owned slaves, but a lot of whites came to the South to try and benefit from that, thinking that, well, hey, maybe I can be a slave owner also, make some money, but most of that didn't materialize for them. Basically, the ones with money kept the money. But Simeon, he, it's like somebody took his silver platter away from him. So we have that. We have possible other things going on that he's battling against inside, and now his hand is gone. So there's a lot of different reasons, why he's venting this anger, outward toward and against Paul, and here's this child who is reflecting the very thing that he hates within himself. Yeah, she definitely relied on Mary a lot to be that some piece of her that she was missing in her relationship from Simeon. She didn't have a connection to her children at all. She didn't have a connection to her husband. She had no connection to anyone. And here's Mary. She was a wet nurse, which is quite common back then, who was basically like a sister to her. And like sisters do, they rely on each other.
How amazing is that they let them have a wet nurse, but they wouldn't drink out of the same cup?
Yeah. Seriously. Yeah. Right. Just not like that.
We would be the total opposite, probably. Here, have my cup. Don't touch it. Yeah, to another person.
Yeah.
And actually, that was, I mean, very, very common to have um, whether it was a slave or after slavery, a maid or just the wet nurse who would. Oh, that's my baby. That's my baby. Come here. You say hi.
Hi.
So, yeah, I've always found that strange also that you would, have a black maid or a slave do something that was so bonding, so intimate between a mother and a child, but then not, you know, use the same restrooms or something like that. But then, again, Nathan and I, we have these conversations, especially when we were about to go down to Mississippi, about all of the different shades of black people that you will see down there. And I said, that's just um, what do I say? It's a result of what happened during the times of slavery. It was okay to have sex with your slave and have children by your slave, but again, not use the same restroom or drink out of the same cup. So there was a lot of different pathologies going on during that time. Uh, South there are, extremely, well, and all over, but in the South, extremely fair looking black people with different color eyes, blue eyes, green eyes, brown eyes, and it's all a result of what happened during those times of slavery. And like Enda, who came from New Orleans, in that region, where they would actually have what they call quadroon balls, meaning that women who were a quarter black and three quarters white or more, and what they would do is they would have these parties or soirees with well-to-do French gentlemen who would take them on as their mistresses. And so they in turn would then have children who were lighter, who looked more Caucasian, and those female children would then marry other white men, usually of French descent. So, just through the years, all of these things have happened, but then there's still, blacks who were slaves and, during Jim Crow, discrimination. So that's really odd to me also.
After that book, the love story between Paul and David, Mary and Mar, that very few books show are love stories of homosexual and heterosexual love in the same novel. And I absolutely love that about this book.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Do you ever feel like while you were writing the book, did you ever feel like, I wonder if I've bitten too much, like I've got too much, because you're covering so much. Like you have all the racial stuff, and you have the mothers depressed, and you have the homosexual love stories. Do you ever feel like, I don't know if I can do justice to all these amazing topics?
Well, it did take a while to write, and there was a few rewrites, with that. But then again, aren't we all as complicated as that?
Oh, yeah.
Somebody, I can't remember who said it, but, everybody has a story. everybody has a story. And as I'm a speech and language pathologist, and I work at a school district in private practice. But basically, I work with a lot of families, and when I meet a family, I always think, they have a story too. You know, you can make a quick judgment and say, oh, they're this type of person that they won't follow through, or they will follow through, or they'll do this, or this is how much they're willing to work. It's easy to make that judgment without knowing that person, because we've all have traveled a different road, and some roads are easier than others, and they're complicated. So writing the novel, I tried to write it as this is how people are. They're complicated. Some people are depressed. They didn't get what they wanted in life. They're not able to bring up that courage, or they know if they do bring up that courage and demand that, hey, I want this in my life, that could mean some serious consequences. Um, as far as Mary has she has to worry about, or she does worry about her husband. Does he really love me? Does he really love this person that I'm looking at in the mirror? And I'm sure all of us can relate to being insecure at one point, in our lives or another, and how that can eat away at our self-esteem. So just having that on top of, now I'm pregnant, I want this baby to come to full term after a few miscarriages, to, oh, now I have to go into town, and well, I know how they treat me when I go into town, and it's just but that's her life. That's her life. That's life for a black woman during that time. For Isabel, that's her life as a white woman during that time. And now we have so many options, as adults, as men, as women. Then they had so few, so few.